Hello and welcome back to the Master Division of the Intermezzo Championship. After being able to win my last game, I had now a solid start with a win in the second place. I am in the first position at the moment at 7 points, however I also have a game more finished than Scipio, who has only a win so far. And today we are going to take a look at the third game of the first batch of games, and it will be against Sektat, who has started with the second place, which we have seen in the last video, and ERock37, who we haven't seen a game of yet, so it will be interesting to see some of his gameplay. And yeah, now without further ado, we are going to take a look at the game. I'm playing in the second position in this game, and first of all we will take a look at the leaders and wonders. We have some lab and science energy in H3 with Bill Gates, Sid Meier, Einstein, there's no spaceflight but Manhattan Project and the Internet. We have no Pierre, there are Marlene Dietrich and Chaplin, but no Fleming, but there is the Hollywood, so certainly some theater synergy in the game, also some solutions for the happy faces, and we have both Churchill and Gandhi for the military, as well as the Manhattan Project, the Red Cross is there as well. In H2 we have Suez Canal and James Cook, so some colonization payoff. We have Nobel but no Newton. We have James Watt in the railroad, and then Shakespeare as a culture leader, but apart from him not a lot more culture leaders. We have Maria Theresa but no ocean liner service, and Catherine and Robespierre as a military action leaders. In H1 we have Joan of Arc as a military action leader. Barbarossa, Nostradamus, Genghis Khan can all help with the strength. We have Eleanor as a nice transitional leader, Gutenberg for some lab and printing press energy, and Saladin as a very solid leader. We have then the two strength wonders with the Meiji Castle and Great Wall. Universitas is there but no Silk Road, and St. Peter's Basilica is there but not the Forbidden City. Then Sektat is playing in first position. He has only some leaders to choose from, and Confucius is probably the best, so that looks like the best choice. And then at my turn, it was a bit of a decision of, do I want to commit to a wonder and then don't know at all what leader I will be getting, or do I take one of those leaders and then I don't know at all what wonder I will be getting, because in both cases it is likely that either all of the leaders or all of the wonders will be gone and taken away before my next turn. So I could just take a wonder, for example the pyramids, which is probably the strongest. But then there's a chance that none of those leaders will be available for me. There could be Hammurabi revealed, who I would be fine with to maybe even take for 2 civil actions at my next turn, and Sektat has Confucius, so he can't take him away. So that's a hope that I could have if I commit to a wonder. Or I take a leader, I would get a yellow card together with it. Then it's likely that both pyramids, Rome roads will be taken, Stonehenge will probably be discarded, so those will likely be gone. There's a chance that a library could be revealed, Acropolis could be fine, Universitas, maybe if I get that early, could be quite strong. So that could also be a possibility. At the end, however, I decided to actually just take the pyramids, have a very strong wonder available, have the hopes of getting Hammurabi, leaving that option alive, and also there's at least a chance, and maybe not even that a very unrealistic chance, that I could still get Ashoka at my next turn, who synergizes quite nicely with the pyramids, because ERock, I thought, will now very likely go for one of those wonders plus one of those leaders on the row. And I thought it is also not unlikely that he will choose Aristotle as a leader. It's certainly possible that he maybe goes for Clio or Ashoka, depending on what preferences he has for the beginning of the game. But it would not be unreasonable to go for either Stonehenge or Rome roads plus Aristotle, and if that should happen, then I still get Ashoka, who pairs nicely with the pyramids. If Ashoka is taken away, then I have to hope that hopefully Hammurabi will be revealed, or if not, maybe at least Hippocrates, who I could then take at some point. But either way, I can't really make sure or certain here that I get a good leader and wonder combination. So at the end, I just committed to that very strong wonder and have either the Ashoka out or the Hammurabi out. ERock goes for the Rome roads. Now I was interested to see what leader he will go for, and he goes for Aristotle. Maybe goes for the, in a vacuum, best leader and best wonder, who are maybe not as great in combination because of the many civil actions that Rome roads take to build, but still it can be a solid combination, and Aristotle in third position is also quite strong. Now H1 starts. Sektat will go for Confucius, builds a mine, takes the Stonehenge, increases his population, He could have waited for the library for the next turn, but then he would need to spend a civil action on one of those HA yellow cards, so the Stonehenge is probably just fine. As you maybe have seen, there is no Hammurabi revealed, so at my turn I will go for Ashoka, which is luckily a possibility with ERock having gone for Aristotle. So I will go for Ashoka, and I also decided to pick up this Engineering Genius. That already makes sure that I have my first color in hand. Of course I might use that card relatively quickly on the pyramids, and I might need a new yellow card, but still maybe for 1 or maybe 2 turns it could help me activate the Ashoka bonus, and then I will just be able to use it very nicely in the pyramids. So I think for 1 civil action that was a relatively clear choice. And then I just build a mine and increase my population. There's not really a lot of benefits in electing Ashoka already. At the next turn I would need to increase my population anyway to get out of corruption. Maybe there could be a situation where I elect Ashoka now, and then at the next turn get out of corruption by building the first step of the pyramids, and then I would have more actions to take some cards. But with Sektat having Confucius, so they are basically being almost a guaranteed seat, I rather wanted to have a free population, and very, very likely I need to increase my population at the next turn anyway. I draw the inhabited territory in a colonization card, so maybe that could be interesting. Sadly, there's no Columbus in the game. That is, of course, a leader that synergizes quite nicely with Ashoka, as you can keep Ashoka for the whole H1 and then get Columbus as a nice transitional leader, but sadly it's not in the game. ERock just goes for some normal stuff, elects Aristotle, builds a mine, increases his population, takes interestingly the rich land. Could have also taken a frugality where he would know for certain that he would be able to use it, but maybe he wanted to accelerate the card draw because the rich land was the only yellow card that wasn't in the discard spot already, so maybe now some technologies are more likely to be available for cheaper for him at his next turn. Sektat seeds and opens the development of settlement. And then he will build 2 steps of the Stonehenge, delays the second lab for now, maybe wants to be more civil action efficient. And sadly he goes for Barbarossa here, who I think is a solid pick for him. He can just keep Confucius as long as he doesn't need to build a lot of military, and then at the right time switch into Barbarossa. I think there's the chance that it will be quite strong, so it's strong for him. But sadly it's also a bit of a denial, or at least I would have liked to get Barbarossa here, because when we take a look at what colors are coming down the row, some yellow cards and then a lot of gray cards, so getting the 3rd color for Ashoka going quickly sadly won't now really be a possibility. With Barbarossa still being in the row and being available for 1 civil action, I could have elected Ashoka, taken Barbarossa, taking a gray card, and then I already would have the full Ashoka bonus going. But with Sektat taking Barbarossa here, sadly that isn't a possibility. Now it is my turn. I elect Ashoka, I get a free population thanks to the development of settlement. And this turn I think there are a lot of different variations that I could go for. I thought about picking one of those alchemies and then somehow maybe making it that I can even build one directly at some point, but it felt a little bit clunky. Maybe it would be strong, I could take alchemy and maybe cultural heritage, at the next turn play cultural heritage and build an alchemy, or maybe just finish the pyramids first and then build an alchemy directly at a later point. But it felt a little bit clunky. I need to take the alchemy for 2 civil actions, and instead of thinking about the alchemy, I then started to more think about the Universitas that is coming down the row, an alternative way of increasing my science production that I at the next turn hopefully will be able to take for 2 civil actions, and that won't require any science investment to get it going. And so I after thinking a bit about it, felt that the Universitas maybe is the stronger option to increase my science production instead of trying something with the alchemy here, especially because there's also no Leonardo for some synergy, and Himeji Castle might be gone, especially with the turn that I will be taking, and then the other wonders are not too exciting. Great Wall, of course, can be quite strong, but Universitas might maybe likely be the best H1 wonder that I can get for myself, so taking that at the next turn could be quite strong, and thanks to the additional resource production that I will have thanks to Ashoka, I hopefully will be able to finish that relatively quickly, also together with the additional resources that I already have in hand from the Engineering Genius. And so I planned around going for Universitas at the next turn, but there are still some variations. I will now build a step of the pyramids, take the theology and the cultural heritage. I could have played it a bit differently, but I think if I don't go for the alchemy I go for the Universitas. Don't want to take the alchemy, then I think I want to take one of those gray cards. And then I kinda have to take the cultural heritage. I could use the civil action to use the engineering genius to already build another step, but then I have no yellow card in hand any longer, so I kinda need to take the cultural heritage as well, and I think it's a fine card for me to have in hand, with having neither a science leader nor a science wonder. The big thing that I needed to think about is if I, instead of building a step of the pyramids, maybe I want to build a second lab already. Because even by building the second lab, thanks to the resource that I get from Ashoka plus the engineering genius, I would be guaranteed to be able to finish the pyramids at the next turn. And I would, after finishing the pyramids and getting the additional civil actions, still have enough civil actions to take the Universitas with my last 2 civil actions. But if I build a second lab now, then that would be my whole turn, so I would be a bit inflexible. It would be guaranteed that I would not be able to get the full Ashoka bonus going at the next turn, and in having invested the 3 resources into the labs might also delay how quickly I can finish the Universitas, and so while I get a bit of additional science earlier, I might just then get the science production from the Universitas 1 turn later. Nonetheless, maybe it could just be best to get the science production going, and at least I will still get the 1 resource production from Ashoka at the next turn. But now at the end I wanted to be a bit more flexible, maybe having the option to take a card just to have maybe a useful card, but also to get the full Ashoka bonus going. Something like Monarchy, Masonry maybe could be interesting, and then I also can still decide on whether maybe investing those resources has the chance of delaying how quickly I can build the Universitas. Also, one thing that I of course needed to decide is whether I want to grab the theology in the bread and circuses. There's no Pierre in the game, no Darwin in the game, and my evaluation of those 2 cards is that if at the end there's no free religion revealed, maybe I value the bread and circuses just very slightly a bit more, because they are cheaper to build resource-wise, which often makes a difference. But as soon as there's a free religion revealed, I like the theology more than the bread and circuses, and probably I like it more than the bread and circuses than I like the bread and circuses more than the theology if there's no free religion revealed. And there are still a lot of developments left. I at the moment have 2 free populations and should, for the next few turns, hopefully always have 1 around. So with that I should have a solid chance to get a free population, to get a free religion if 1 should be revealed. And with that I rather wanted the theology. Also there's Joan of Arc in the game, so there's some synergy for having temples instead of arenas, not a lot of arena synergy, so here I think the theology is the better pick than the bread and circuses. But if there would be Pierre in the game, that already would be enough to let me go for bread and circuses instead of theology, as long as I don't have a free religion. If I would have already a free religion guaranteed, again it would get a bit closer, but I might still go for the bread and circuses. I draw the medieval army tactic and a wealthy territory, so 2 territories I have already in hand. ERock takes the masonry, takes the alchemy, and develops the masonry, so I think I like this turn. The masonry can be used in the Rome roads and will save resources on the alchemies. He scores science with Aristotle, so despite it costing 2 civil actions, I do think the masonry is a good choice here. Sektat seeds and opens the development of trade routes. There's a small chance. I thought that maybe Sektat could take the Universitas away, but he has already a lot of science with the Stonehenge, and I just think it would not be too great for him, and instead he will also now go for the monarchy and get his second lab going, meaning the Universitas will be available for me. At my turn I don't push, and as you can see I will use the engineering genius in the pyramids. I could have not used it, which could help me to get out of corruption, but the thing is, I kinda still would have some issues, or if I want to finish the pyramids and get the Universitas, I still would need to do something else in order to get out of corruption. And if I use the engineering genius, that's something that I need to do in order to get out of corruption. As you can see, if I would have spent two resources more instead of using the Engineering Genius. I know still would have Corruption. I could have built a warrior, but with having that medieval army tactic, I didn't necessarily wanted to commit towards building a warrior, and so I just used the Engineering Genius so that instead of getting out of Corruption with increasing my population, or building a warrior, I can now get out of Corruption with building the second lab, which now sadly in hindsight makes it that I should have just built it at the turn before. I basically lost one science in the process. Maybe I should have just built it. But if there wouldn't have been the development of trade routes revealed, it maybe could have been interesting to be able to maybe take the swordsman, maybe take the code of laws, maybe even the warfare. So it could have given me some options, but now I just lost the science. Maybe I should have just built a second lab at the turn before. I have now 1+4 resources, meaning in 2 turns I will have 9 resources, which is enough to finish the Universitas if I don't need to spend resources on anything else, and then I could get the Universitas still going relatively quickly, and the science boost hopefully will be helpful for me. Sadly for now I haven't activated the food bonus of Ashoka, which is not ideal. I draw an aggression and a legion tactic, so at least I have some more options what my tactics. For my tactics, ERock can now finish the Rome roads in 2 civil actions thanks to the masonry. He could have even developed the alchemy and gone for an upgrade, but instead he will take those 2 technologies, score 2 more science with Aristotle, and the Code of Laws is certainly very useful for him to have soon. Sektat seeds and opens the development of science. He goes for the cartography. That is of course a nice pairing with Barbarossa, and we have Cook and Suez in the game, so if he has some colonies that could work out quite well for him. He builds a step of the Stonehenge, which allows him to develop the irrigation, and then by upgrading one farm he is able to get out of corruption, start some food production which can help him with Barbarossa. Generally I think he is nicely prepared for Barbarossa, has now additional food income, will get a happy face from the Stonehenge, and has already 3 military actions with the monarchy and maybe even some colonies coming, so he has a lot of things going that could make it that this Barbarossa works out quite well. At my turn I will again skip the politics phase. To get out of corruption I basically have to increase my population and build a step of the Universitas. I still didn't want to build a warrior necessarily here. After doing those 2 things I have 3 civil actions left. At this turn I have to really think about what leader do I want to go for. There are 4 leaders in a row. Sektat has already Barbarossa. ERock unlikely. I think it's unlikely that he would take Saladin for 2 civil actions, so I could plan around going for Saladin at the next turn. I could think about taking any of those 3 leaders at this turn, or I could think about waiting for Joan of Arc or Gutenberg. And then there's also this copy of Iron in the row where I need to think about if I maybe want to go for that Iron. I could at the next turn maybe go for 2 Iron upgrades, maybe get the Iron upgrades before I go for the Universitas, and it could potentially be interesting. But it's also a bit costly to take it for 2. And I at the end felt that Eleanor is actually quite a strong pick for me for 1 civil action. Maybe I could just go for Saladin at the next turn, but I ideally now can keep for Ashoka for 1 or 2 more turns. And then Eleanor at the end of H1 will be a nice transitional leader. And if I am able to replace her quickly, she might even give me a similar amount of civil actions as Saladin, but she can give me the additional draws and culture with discarding. So I felt like Eleanor for 1 civil action is just a very solid pick. I could now still take the Iron for 2 civil actions, but at the end I wanted to have this breakthrough for 1 civil action, and I played the cultural heritage to be civil action efficient. And I felt like maybe it could still be best to just finish Universitas first anyway. I'm not certain about it. Maybe the Iron production first could still be better, but it's also just very fine to get Universitas first, and then I can either wait for the second copy of Iron, or with James Watt and a railroad being the game, maybe I also just hope to get a coal going, so I was not willing to pay 2 civil actions for the Iron, also partly because both of my opponents are not nicely prepared to go into Iron quickly. ERock has a full hand, can't easily get into Iron at the next turn immediately. Sektat would need additional science, would maybe need to finish the Stonehenge, but then he's lacking the resources to get into Iron immediately, so both of my opponents are not in a position to just get some quick Iron upgrades going at the next turn immediately, so I also didn't see some big hate drafting reasons to take this Iron for 2 civil actions, but it could still be a very fine move. But lately I have valuing it a bit more highly again to leave myself open to coal, especially if there's James Watt in the game. So here I wasn't willing to take the iron for 2, and instead I can get a breakthrough for 1 and already hopefully very solid leader for 1 civil action. I revealed a Legion tactic so that I can keep the colonization card and the other tactic in hand so that I'm still flexible if I want to go for infantry or cavalry units. ERock seeds, the development of planning is revealed. The options for that are development of agriculture, warfare and politics. ERock chooses the development of warfare, will interestingly develop the code of laws, making space in his hand. I mean, it's a bit tricky for him. He probably wants to also pick a leader. Nostradamus could be very fine. Then there's this iron that he can pick. But with developing the code of laws, he drops relatively low in science, which maybe could be problematic. But maybe he can just at the next turn start going for the alchemy, for example. But at the end of the turn, we will see that now in order to get out of corruption, he will actually build a religion and a warrior. He could have also increased his population, build a warrior. It's still unclear if the development of religion will be revealed. Maybe I would have preferred that over building the religion. It could of course be an indicator that a happy face related event might be coming, so I have to be a bit careful about that. But yeah, I think increasing his population additional time instead of building the religion might be preferable, but he has to do some somewhat awkward stuff here in order to get this turn going. Maybe just skipping the iron and getting the alchemy going maybe could be an idea, but of course it depends a little bit on what event knowledge he has and maybe what the one event is that he has seeded into the deck. So he has Nostradamus going now. He lets the Code of Law stay on 2 civil actions for Sektat, which I was happy to see. The development of crafts are revealed. Sektat will finish the Stonehenge, takes the Knights, develops the Knights, switches to Barbarossa now. Thanks to the 1 food upgrade that he has done at the turn before, he has now just enough food to get 2 Barbarossa activations going, also just enough resources, and he has just enough military actions to now, also with the help of the development of warfare, get 2 medieval army tactics going, and together with the cartography he's now at 11 strength, so out of the sudden he's very threatening and is certainly threatening aggression on especially me, who is at 1 strength with 2 military actions. ERock at least has Nostradamus, so he could maybe be somewhat safe, but also has to still increase his strength further to be safe. But I, out of the sudden, am very pressured. And I have to react to that. I will of course now take the development of warfare from the development of planning. And first I thought about that I maybe want to get into this medieval army tactic. Maybe take the knights, develop them, increase my population, and then build 2 knights or build 1 knight and reveal the tactic. But that would be somewhat clunky. I think I had issues getting out of corruption like this. And I wouldn't be safe. Sektat would still have a guaranteed aggression against me. Or wait, what I actually was thinking about was, I thought about going into knights, but I realized it is not enough, and then I saw this theocracy, which helps me with the happy faces, just gives me 1 strength and an additional military action, and with the pyramids I have already an additional civil action, so with the pyramids it's maybe where the theocracy shines the most. And then I thought about taking knights, developing knights, taking theocracy, developing theocracy, and then building some, I mean the 1 population will go into the warrior. And when I now develop theocracy, I could now develop the knights, build 1 knight, reveal the tactic, but I would have 2 corruption. I would be safe from an aggression like this. But it just felt extremely costly to have corruption and to not finish the Universitas, and so instead I went for a turn that makes it that I at least threaten to defend against an aggression and also have a chance to draw a defense card, but I don't have corruption and I finished the Universitas, and that is by not going for the knights and instead going for warrior, taking developing Code of Laws, going for Eleanor, as I thought it is actually possible that the age will end before my next turn, and then finishing the Universitas. And no, I will now get at least 2 draws. It's not likely, but it's possible that I could draw a 2nd defense card, which I would need in order to defend against Sektat. I at least threaten to be able to defend against an aggression. So if Sektat has a strong event to seed, or maybe some good events that he's hoping for, maybe he wants to get some colonies going, he might choose to rather seed an event instead of playing an aggression, with me at least threatening to defend against an aggression right now. And I, with that, was fine with being at that risk, because I will get 2 science and 1 cult from the Universitas, I will not lose 2 resources to corruption, and I will get a Code of Laws to be playing on 6 instead of only 5 civil actions, and that combined is just so much value that even if I would now get hit by an aggression, it would probably still be better if I go for this turn. So I think going for the knights here would be a bit of panicking, and instead I go for a turn that makes me somewhat safe. I now maybe have to hope that I get this copy of Swordsman, and then I can just get all of that stuff going. Maybe I could have kept Eleanor in hand. ERock maybe needs to spend some actions to get out of corruption, but he could still end up taking 1 or maybe 2 cards from the row. And Sektat has a lot of free actions, and especially if he sees that he can maybe cost me a civil action by ending the age, maybe it could be worthwhile doing so for him, and Ashoka would have given me only 1 resource anyway. Maybe I could have just risked it, but if I should get an event, maybe getting some draws immediately with Eleanor could also not be too bad, so at the end I went with Eleanor already, electing her this turn. I sadly don't draw an event and don't draw a defense card, so I am in danger of an aggression. ERock seeds and gets an additional science from a Confucius event, increases his population, develops the swordsman, so he also reacts to the strength push from Sektat, and that could have consequences for him, because with investing 4 science into the swordsman, he has now not enough science to get into alchemy or iron at the next turn, which could be problematic. So the pressure that Sektat has put upon us with going for 11 strength has now for ERock maybe some serious consequences, and of course also I needed to react to that, and I could now get hit by an aggression. If I don't get hit by an aggression, then I think the disruption was not even that big, but if I get hit by an aggression, then of course that could be quite bad. And with that I was very relieved to see Sektat seed, and I also am somewhat happy to see the Dark Ages. Of course, I'm the one who loses some science, while the others don't lose any science. Maybe that was even seeded by ERock, who went for the Code of Laws and now again made sure to stay relatively low in science, instead of maybe going for alchemy early on. But it could have hit me a lot harder. I just invested 12 science into both Code of Laws and Theocracy, so before my turn I had a lot more science saved up, and if I wouldn't have had a nice way of spending those, that event could have hit me a lot harder. And with my 4 science production, I soon also again might have had more science saved up, so I was somewhat happy about that event being revealed right now. Sektat interestingly takes the iron for 3 civil actions, which seems quite expensive. But when we take a look at his turn, maybe he just doesn't have the most exciting options. There are a lot of grey cards, and for 1 civil action, some yellow cards for 2. But with not even being able to develop the iron immediately, it feels somewhat expensive to just take those 2 cards. But I think it's really hard to find a turn here that maybe feels like an efficient turn for him. And no, maybe he at least can start some iron upgrades at the following turn then. Now it's my turn, I can't push sadly, I will increase my population to get out of corruption. And at the moment I'm the weakest. Sektat has seeded the majority of those events. There have already been 2 events revealed that were no strength events, and I thought it is certainly possible that he could have pushed some strength events. And with that I was willing to go for the swordsman here, also because I have maybe some difficulties to spend my actions efficiently. If I don't go for the swordsman here, I could just take a bunch of yellows. And so I go for the swordsman. I decided to use up all of my H1 military actions, which sadly will mean that I for certain can't push again at the next turn with Eleanor. But missing out on 1 upgrade already would make it that I'm the weakest again on ERock's turns. I need all of those upgrades in order to not be the weakest, and with 1 draw, it's of course also far from guaranteed that I would be able to get an event. So at the end I was just willing to use all of my draws while still being in H1, which is of course not ideal with Eleanor, but now I'm at 9 strength. ERock can just copy the Legion tactics, then he will be stronger again, so it won't make me stronger for long, but I also am just a quite a bit more safer from potential things that Sektat could do. With Barbarossa, there's always the chance that maybe he could go for even more strength. I then take the urban growth in the reserves, just getting 2 yellow cards. I'm in bronze mines, so getting some help for the resources could be quite strong. If there would be a bit more support for dramas like Bach and Antoni Gaudi, I maybe would have been willing to pick that up. There is Marlene Dietrich, but she alone often isn't enough for me to go for dramas. I need for that Bach more. Maybe I could still pick it, maybe some other players would pick it and it could be fine, but especially with being on bronze mines, at the end rather just wanted to have those yellow cards to help me. H2 starts. ERock, as we saw, discarded the Richland A, so he could have maybe picked the Frugality A earlier on. He seeds, and sadly he gets a Confucius event, which I think makes a huge difference, because now he has actually the science to get into alchemy and invest his actions nicely, boost his production, and then he increases his population and takes the Richland. So here sadly the Confucius event I think was quite helpful for him in order to find an efficient turn. Sektat seeds as well, opens to historic territory, was willing to bid 1 unit, but of course I knew that if Sektat is just willing to bid anything, he will be the one to win it. I wasn't willing, so for that territory to risk bidding a bit higher. Maybe I could have said that probably Sektat would also be willing to send a knight away with having Barbarossa, with the Suez and Cook being the game. Maybe I could have been brave enough to bid 4, but if I would at the end be the one who wins it, it would just have some very bad consequences. Or maybe I should have risked it. I often am willing to risk such things, just pushing it a little bit more highly, maybe making it that Sektat has to spend an additional resource with rebuilding a knight, or maybe has to send 1 colonization card away at least, so that he is not able to bid too high on the next colony that might be coming. But here I wasn't willing to risk it. Sektat sends a warrior away, starts going for 1 mine upgrade, uses Barbarossa to rebuild a warrior, goes for another mine upgrade, takes the engineering genius and the urban growth, so that looks like a very efficient turn. Now it is my turn. I sadly again can't seed with Eleanor, so Eleanor not being ideal. However, as you can see, I find a very early replacement for her. But it was the question for me if I should pick that replacement, which is James Watt, already for 3 civil actions this turn, because my first idea was that I certainly want to take the coal here, because ERock hasn't committed to iron yet, so for both of us I think the coal could be quite strong. There is even a railroad coming down the road together with that coal. And first I thought, if I go for the coal, I should have good chances to get James Watt at the next turn, because ERock could take him in hand, but all the while he has him in hand, he can't commit into the iron and needs to wait and wait. If the second copy of coal is revealed, then of course he might just go maybe for Watt and the second copy of coal, so that would be a bit dangerous. And I still thought he could maybe still do it, because even if he goes for the iron, maybe he can just at least use him for the selective breeding, maybe use him more as a transitional leader, maybe you have Nostradamus for a while longer, and he also of course sees how strong James Watt would be for me, so maybe he would be willing to go for a leader that maybe could be a bit awkward for him in order to deny a strong leader for me. And generally I just felt like getting that coal going now with the James Watt discount would really boost my production that much that I just don't want to risk it, even though it is maybe not likely that James Watt would be taken away, but it is possible, and here I wouldn't risk it. So it is somewhat expensive, but at least Eleanor's civil actions help me to still get a decent turn going here. I take James Watt, I elect him, I take the coal. I can even develop the coal, but then I'm missing 1 resource to go for an upgrade already this turn. I thought about playing the reserves for food and then increasing my population, but then I would have only 6 resources at the next turn, which is only enough for 1 upgrade, and I felt that it is a stronger move here in order to get out of corruption. Build a religion with the urban growth, just spending 1 resource, and that leaves me with a civil action that I can use to take the rich land. With the rich land I have now exactly 8 resources at the next turn that I can use for mine upgrades, which is just enough to get 2 upgrades going towards coal. and then I just boost my production in that turn, and having that guaranteed just felt very strong. So I was willing to replace Eleanor here, who wasn't the ideal leader, but I replaced her very quickly. So she basically gave me, I think, 1 civil action per turn. And it's of course not ideal that I needed to take my leader for that expensive, but even with not ceding at all, I think she still turned out to be at least a fine leader here. And I thought with the James Watt I might be able to build up a strong economy from now on. I was especially hoping that I might get the railroad at the next turn. I didn't have the biggest hopes. I think ERock might not take it, but Sektat has that engineering genius, maybe needs something to invest into. And if there are no stronger alternatives, I thought the railroad might be gone, but even without the railroad, I think that will turn out strong for me, and there's at least a chance that I might still get the railroad. I don't take the cavalryman here, so if I miss out on the second copy, I have no cavalry technology at all available, which is a bit of a risk, but I think just boosting my production with that rich land is just too strong, so I think it's a risk worth taking here. I draw 2 events and an aggression. I also will miss out on the first copy of Selective Breeding, very likely, but Sektat has irrigation, so I was hoping that I might get the second copy unless Sektat is willing to go for a hate draft. ERock goes for some upgrades. He didn't see it as the weakest. Interestingly, he has also waited with copying the Legion tactic, which is of course somewhat expensive, costing him some H2 draws, especially if he has no event in hand with Nostradamus. Maybe that also means that he doesn't really expect any strength events to come. And also again this turn, he won't spend the military actions to get stronger than me. Or at least not weaker than me. Sektat seeds, and there is also no strength event coming, instead another colony. Maybe I should have a bit more aggressively here. I think Sektat, with the Suez Canal even coming down the row, as you can see, I think would certainly be willing to at least send a knight away. So despite it being extremely awkward if I win it, I think in this situation I can be certain enough that Sektat bids more so that I can adjust my own bid and make it just a bit higher so that he has to send a little bit extra away. I think I maybe should have done it already in the colony before, but especially now with the Suez Canal coming and with that probably being a bit of a stronger territory, I should have pushed the price here a little bit. I think I was too careful here. Of course, if I have to send out of the Sudden 2 swordsmen away, it's extremely awkward for me, but I think Sektat just for basically guaranteed, it's basically guaranteed that he is at least willing to send a knight away here, and even if he doesn't, it's very likely that he has at least 1 defense card available, and just pushing a little bit more out of him, I think would have been worth it here. He wins it now for only a warrior, because of me having maybe being a bit afraid. He has now already 2 colonies for the Suez, so I was on one hand afraid of that. On the other hand, I thought it could also have good consequences for me, because if he wants to go for the Suez, he probably can't go for the railroad here, meaning my chances to get railroad might actually be increased now. Interestingly, Sektat rebuilds another knight, goes for Nobel, goes for another mine upgrade, and takes the urban growth and the rifleman. He doesn't reveal a new tactic though, so it's interesting that he didn't go for a new warrior, but maybe he has a hussars tactic in hand, or maybe a mobile artillery, and is already planning towards that. And he didn't take the railroad. I see the prosperity in, I'm not the weakest, so I thought let's just start pushing, and the prosperity hopefully should be a fine event. The pestilence is revealed though, and it is somewhat annoying. I thought about losing a farm. At the end I lost the religion, but soon I will need a happy face again. The team sports will be gone, I won't take it, but maybe I can build either theology or an organized religion directly at some point. But it's still a bit annoying. ERock has a free population, Sektat has a free population, so that probably hits me the hardest here, and maybe I should have just not seeded, but I'm not the weakest. ERock at any time can get stronger by just copying the Legion tactic, so I think it was reasonable to seed here, but sadly the pestilence causes me to destroy something now. But it also maybe wouldn't have changed very quickly, so I just would have gotten hit by the pestilence a bit later when I wouldn't have seeded here. And then I think this turn is relatively straightforward. I develop the coal, I go for 2 upgrades with Watt, and I take the railroad. I think it's still quite early. I need at least 2 more turns until I can finish the railroad, but even then I think it will be in a very strong wonder for me. The strength will be very helpful. I will be playing on very strong resource production, and with that I felt that is looking quite strong. I miss out on the rifleman, so for H3 tactics I'm not ideally prepared. It's already the last copy. I might miss out on the cavalryman, but with the strength of the railroad, I at least for certain will at least have a somewhat decent amount of strength available. I draw some cards: Politics of Strength, Independence Declaration, and an Infiltrate. ERock upgrades a mine, upgrades a farm, which allows him to just increase his population at the next turn, and this turn he is willing to upgrade to the Legion tactic, which is maybe a sign that now there is at least one or two strength events coming, so I was a bit worried that I might get hit something by at Sektat's turn. He then takes the reserves with his last 2 civil actions, isn't willing to go for any of those H2 leaders. Sektat Seeds, I was a bit afraid, and sadly I do get hit by a strength event here. The Reign of Terror hits me, and after already getting hit by the Pestilence, it does start to get a bit annoying with those population losses. Sektat will now go for the Suez Canal, that I expected. He also goes for the Architecture, which I think makes a lot of sense. He has more than enough science for it, gets it for 1 civil action. It's, I think, quite strong for him to get it Architecture. And also the Journalism, which will allow him to, after he has finished the Suez Canal, when he will be at 9 resource production, maybe he will even get a colony which helps him with population. I think the Journalism might be the perfect thing for him to invest into, so I think that turn makes a lot of sense, and sadly he was able to get some strong stuff for 1 civil action here. I, at least at my turn, will be able to get the strategy, which helps me with the strength. I decided to just take and develop it immediately because I thought it's certainly possible that there are even more strength events coming. I lost a farm to the Reign of Terror. I thought about losing a mine, but I decided that I want to still upgrade it. And I thought maybe I can be fine by rebuilding the second farm as a selective breeding at some point, but it's certainly not ideal. But I wanted to keep as much resource production as possible for now. And I developed the strategy to not be the weakest. I then upgrade my last coal mine so that I'm now at 9 resource production. I have enough resource to finish the railroad at the next turn. I take the scientific method, and then I build a step of the railroad already. I don't have knowledge about rats, I think, but both of my opponents went for food production. ERock with having knowledge from Nostradamus, so it doesn't look like rats are in the deck. And with that I build a step because I think I want to finish the railroad for certain at the next turn. And then I'm just 1 civil action more ahead, but I wanted to have the scientific method available so that I can invest into something. I will have a lot of resource production, and just being able to invest it into something could be important. There are also some leaders that maybe profit from it. Maybe Bill Gates, even though his resource production could even be overkill. Sid Meier, Einstein, especially with having Watt, being prepared for some more leaders could be nice. And so I was willing to pick up the scientific method here for 1 civil action. I draw some cards, some events, and also a War territory. I can finish the railroad, which puts me at 15 strength, at 17 strength even. ERock is somewhat relying on Nostradamus, so if he isn't careful here, I thought I might be able to declare a war at him at the next turn. He takes the constitutional monarchy, that might help him with the military actions, upgrades the warrior, but he remains the weakest for now. He, I think, almost never pushed with Nostradamus, which is unfortunate for him. So despite having him, he is still slightly lagging behind in culture income. He upgrades another farm and then ends his turn, and he has not the most resource saved up. Didn't take the cannons, so I felt like I might be able to declare the war against him at the next turn. Sektat Seeds, the Crusades are revealed, so indeed another strength event. This time at least I'm not the weakest. Sektat this turn finishes the Suez Canal, can use the Architecture for that. The colony that he's getting is maybe not the ideal one for him. He probably would have preferred some others, but still getting 9 additional resources, basically a refund almost on the Suez Canal. I mean, it's a refund combined with the resource production that he's getting. Is still not bad. And he then takes the organized religion as happy face solution. He needs more population, I think, so it's good to upgrade this farm as quickly as possible. And then he develops the journalisms already and can maybe start building some of them at the next turn. He now also, I think already the turn before, revealed the heavy cavalry tactic, so that's why he went for that additional knight instead of the warrior some turns ago. Now it is my turn, and I came to the conclusion that it is very safe for me and probably quite annoying for ERock to declare this war over territory against him. I will actually still get 3 draws. I just finished the railroad. I can't, and I also don't want to build any more military units. And so I finished the railroad, being at 17 strength. I think the only way how ERock could potentially win the war is if he has the right tactic and the promise of military protection pact, but that is a very low risk. I also will take that copy of cannons away actually, so he would rely on the second one to have something like defensive army. He doesn't have enough military actions to go for a classic army if he should get help from the events in form of new deposits or something. So yeah, likely, extremely likely I should be able to win this war, and it is probably even annoying for him to make sure to only lose 1 yellow token, so it could even be that I steal 2 yellow tokens, and with that I think the war should be quite strong for me here. I could now spend my last 3 civil actions to just make sure that I have the selective breeding, but at this point I was willing to not take it and hope that Sektat won't find a time for a denial. He is somewhat low in civil actions, has a lot of resources to spend, and with that it would at least be somewhat costly. I was hoping to deny it, and if he denies it, at least I have a chance for an early mechanized agriculture. At least I get some additional yellow tokens, so hopefully I would at least somehow be able to do something. I can upgrade my lab, so I could still invest into something, but it would be annoying for me, but it would also be somewhat expensive to take it for 3. I would not take the cannons, maybe give ERock more options for his defense, and with that I wasn't willing to take that for 3. Took the cannons instead, increased my population to spend that action already, and then I take the opera here. There are some yellow cards, but I have some very strong production. I mean, the frugality could be useful at some point, especially if I would miss out on the selective breeding, so I could consider it instead of increasing my population, but I also think I need to be civil action efficient. And the opera I wanted to have because it just, again, gives me something to invest into. I miss out on a happy face solution here. The last copy of Organized Religion will be discarded. I could have, instead of increasing my population plus taking the opera, maybe just taking the cannons and the Organized Religion. But it felt somewhat expensive. I maybe at the next turn could still have a chance of developing the theology. And the thing is, there are both Chaplin and Marlene Dietrich in the game. I hopefully will win 1 or maybe even 2 yellow tokens. So I was hoping that I will for some time be fine with the happy faces. And those 2 leaders, Chaplin and Marlene, were also the reason why I thought having the opera could be strong. Because with James Watt it can just be strong to replace him relatively quickly. And then the more leaders you are prepared for, the better. So I have now scientific methods in hand for some leaders, operas in hand for some leaders, or if there's an early leader, I hopefully would be able to replace James Watt relatively quickly. I draw some cards, a colonization card, the International Trade Agreement, which is always a nice draw. ERock goes for the common, so he doesn't go for cavalryman or something, takes the Organized Religion in hand, actually develops it already. That could be an indicator of a happy face related event coming, but it could also be that he just wants to spend his civil actions efficiently. He then takes the patriotism and upgrades one of his mines. Sektat goes for the justice system. I think more civil actions and maybe also the blue tokens will be quite strong for him, and then he is willing to disband his warrior to already be able to get 2 journalisms going, which I think is totally worth it. And I was a bit afraid of his position. Yes, I mean, I have now even stronger resource production, but the journalisms just allow him to run a bit away with the culture. And I first was thinking maybe he will have even some difficulties at the next turn, because the age will be ending, he loses 2 yellow tokens, he can increase his population, but the population will be unhappy, so he can't build another journalism. Maybe he'll invest into the Organized Religion. But then I realized that the Eiffel Tower is coming down the row, and I think that is the perfect thing for him to invest into at the next turn. Or not the perfect thing maybe, but I think it will be by far the strongest option for him, unless there's something from H3 revealed. and then he can increase his culture income even more, so I was a bit worried about him running a bit away with the culture here, and me maybe not being as quick enough to follow up with that. But I will at least now steal 2 yellow tokens from ERock. I offered the international trade agreement afterwards, giving me some additional food production. Sektat also wasn't willing to deny the selective breeding for 2 civil actions, which I think probably would be too expensive for him. And so those things are going very nicely for me. I get an additional food production out of that. There's the red cross in the game, and I just have some very strong resource productions. I think food is what I need more here. I can this turn go for selective breeding and a scientific method. I could either go for 2 scientific method upgrades and 1 farm upgrade, which at least would give me enough food to increase my population at the next turn. Or I could build an additional farm, upgrade a farm, and go for 1 upgrade. So I would get 3 additional food, but would miss out on 2 science. And I think both population, especially after getting hit by pestilence and reign of terror earlier, but also the 2 science would be quite valuable for me. At the end, I went with the additional food, because more population will just also help me investing my resource. Of course, more science could as well to maybe develop a technology, but and also getting an H3 government form at some point could be strong. But here I was willing to just build this additional farm instead of going for the second lab upgrade. That means that I will lose the theology now, but with my yellow bank, the opera, I was hoping to be somewhat fine. And I also will lose the reserves, but I think I just need to get all of that production going. I don't have the time now to use that card. I draw some cards. The second colonization card was the historic territory. ERock seeds and opens the raiders, which I'm not part of, so they have to lose a little bit. Maybe it doesn't hit them too much, but who knows, could still make a difference at some point. ERock takes the cannons, develops the cavalryman, builds 1, takes the frugality, the wave, and the efficient upgrade, so takes a lot of cards from the row. That means that after his turn, H3 will start, and actually a bunch of H3 cards will already be revealed, so maybe it's also a good time to take a look at the overview now. Culture-wise, it's relatively close for now, but Sektat is already a bit ahead. Will likely now go for the Eiffel Tower, so will maybe start to run a bit away with the culture. And I think Sektats in my position are maybe a bit stronger than ERock's position here, because ERock has overall a solid position, has a solid production, but he will now lose 2 more yellow tokens, so the yellow token lost to the war I think is annoying for him. He has the most civil actions actually for now, so that's an advantage that he's having, but he's slightly behind in culture. He actually still needs a leader, which he will miss out on now with Robespierre gone, so... Or he could maybe still get Robespierre the next turn if none of those cards is taken, but likely he will be gone, so he is playing without a leader for now. And yeah, I think my economy with my 12 resource production and my strong yellow bank is just even stronger, while I am not that much ahead in culture. As soon as I replace James Watt, I actually score 6 additional culture thanks to coal mines and the railroads, so that is a bit of additional culture that I can already count towards. And with that I felt I have an advantage over ERock, and I was quite a bit worried about Sektat's position. His really strong resource production, at least his food income is somewhat limiting, but the Eiffel Tower I think gives him now a nice chance to invest in many resources that he's having, and I was a bit worried that he might be running away with the culture while also having a strong economy to work with, but maybe with my big production I will still be able to do something about it and find ways to out-culture him, or maybe catch up with impacts or wonders at the end. H3 starts. Sektat takes the Eiffel Tower, finishes it, is now 9 culture production, increases his population and builds an additional farm, so he wants to get some additional food production going, and we just said that this may be his weakness, so I think that's probably a good move. Will maybe take a little bit of time until it will really give him an additional population, but it will happen, and with that it should, I think, be a fine move to build this additional farm. Now it is my turn. I first of all seed a Cold War into the deck. I thought it should be very likely that I'm one of the 2 strongest, and the 6 additional science could really help me to maybe get towards or get into an H3 government form, so I was willing to push it, even though of course it would also help one of my opponents. The last event is sadly the cultural influence, which is now revealed after Sektat went for those journalisms in the Eiffel Tower, so that will increase the culture gap. And at my turn, I will just spend some actions on my civilization. I increase my population 2 times. I upgrade a lab and then take the engineering, the breakthrough. I think that turn just felt the most efficient to me. Of course, I could wait to get this upgrade going with the engineering, but the thing is, if I don't upgrade that, I am missing a science even with the breakthrough to get into both opera and engineering at the next turn. I thought at the next turn it could just be quite strong to develop those 2 techs, build 2 operas and start my own culture reduction. Of course, it depends a lot on what leaders are available or if there's some other stuff that I need to go for, but that felt like a good plan for the next turn. I get my civil actions out of the way with increasing my population 2 times as often as I can, and the engineering, even after already going for that upgrade to labs, I think still has the potential to save me a lot of resources, especially if the game should turn out to be a more peaceful one, and with that I was willing to take it here for 2 civil actions. There are also 2 copies of computers coming down the row, but I didn't have enough science to get into them immediately. There could still be a chance that I get one of them at the next turn, so I was fine with not taking them. ERock Seeds, the scientific breakthrough is revealed, which gives me and Sektat the most science, so that is maybe quite a bit of help for both of us. ERock doesn't get as much science, but at least allows him to already get into computers this turn, which also gives him then even more science. So also for him, I think the event was not too bad. He increases his population, takes the patriotism, and then builds an organized religion to fix his happy faces. Sektat Seeds and a Cold War is revealed, so even more science for both of us. Sektat has now even 32 science saved up, is still willing to take computers and get into those, but it also gives him a nice way to invest his resources without requiring population. He develops the military theory, making him the strongest, and sadly he is also taking the professional sports away, which could be quite useful for me, because I have only those operas. There's Chaplin coming down the row, but it's a bit problematic for him to go in for him, as we will see at my next turn. So maybe Sektat wanted to deny it from me. It of course also helps for a lot of impacts, could help him with the strength, so I think it is just also a strong pick for him, a cheap technology for potential Nobel Prizes. Now it's my turn, and as you can see, I start the turn by actually ceding the historic territory. The reason for that is that I will not go for Chaplin. I won't take that copy of Professional Sports, so I was not too afraid, but it is possible that it could be denied by ERock. And I just felt like I need one more way of potentially getting some happy faces, because otherwise there are some scenarios where I get really screwed. So I wanted to give me another option, and I have actually 3 colonization cards in hand. I can maybe send a Legion tactic away, which could even help me transitioning into other tactics. So I felt like I have some decent chances to win it, despite Sektat having the additional colonization force. And so I was willing to push that into the deck. I could not push at all, but I had some events that I wanted to see it, maybe just the impact, or maybe even one of the strength events, or the iconoclasm, because I will go for a new leader now. So I kind of wanted to move the deck forward, as I'm not the weakest. But if I push now and don't push the historic territory, then there's a chance that the event deck flips already before my next turn. I thought that could potentially end up being the most important card that I need to see quickly. The prosperity is revealed, which sadly only gives me 1 food now, after I had lost the religion to the pestilence quite some turns earlier on. I will start the turn by going for the engineering. And normally I think Chaplin could be a good solution for me. Bill Gates would certainly be a consideration when I just look at myself, and probably I might still go for him, because of him being a civil action cheaper for me available, but because of the happy faces are actually quite useful, and because I have already that much resource production, I think maybe Chaplin could potentially be the better choice for myself, especially if he would be available for 1 civil action. But in this scenario, ERock has no leader available, and he went into computers already, and I thought I can't leave him Bill Gates, especially with Bill Gates still being quite strong for myself. Maybe it will be challenging for me to actually be able to invest all of the resources that I will be getting because of him. But still, it could still be that those will be helpful for me. And at this point, I generally felt that my position has some advantages over ERock's, but as soon as he gets Bill Gates, he is totally back into the running, and I thought that alone is already reason enough to go for Bill Gates myself. And even without hate drafting reasons involved, Bill Gates, with being a civil action cheaper available, I think maybe I would still go for him with Chaplin and Gates being available for one, and with no hate drafting reasons involved. Gets close because of the happy faces being useful, but and also because of Hollywood being in the game. But here I went for Bill Gates. But first I will go for one opera. I will go for Bill Gates, scoring 6 culture when James Watt will retire. Build one opera. Take the civil service, because one way that helps me investing all of the resources that I'm having now is to have more civil actions, and also the additional blue tokens might be helpful to maybe be able to store up more resources. So I think the civil service being quite strong here, despite me having already a copy of Code of Laws. And then I could just build a second copy of Opera, but I instead built third scientific method lab, because I have, of course, Bill Gates, but I didn't really build it because of the resources. I already, with 16 resource production, have probably more than I will need. But I think the science income could just be extremely important. I might still want to develop some techs, and especially I want at some point maybe still have the chance to develop an H3 government form. But also, if the game turns more military heavy, in order to maybe fulfill that modern army tactic that I have available, will need a lot of science. There might be Nobel Prizes at some point, so I think the science is just extremely valuable for me. And who knows, maybe I can actually use the additional resources at some point. Maybe at some point destroy a coal mine or something, if I don't have enough population to work with. So I felt like that is still worth it. I'm still missing one science to get into democracy, but for now the happy face of the theocracy is still quite valuable, and so maybe it's not that important to be able to get into a democracy immediately at the next turn, which is why I at the end was willing to get into the civil service here, which at least makes it that I have now one civil action more than Sektat. And thanks to the James Watt culture, I will already beat 40 cultures, only 21 culture behind Sektat. When we count in the Bill Gates bonus, I'm actually only 15 culture behind Sektat. So with my 18 resource production, certainly possible that I maybe can catch up to Sektat, but Sektat with those computers and still having lots of resources and a higher culture production might still be at a bit of an advantage. But I certainly felt there are ways for me to claw myself back to get a way back into the game. I draw the impact of balance with having that and the impact of agriculture. I was really eyeing those 2 copies of mechanized agriculture that are coming down the row. If one of them should be available for me at the next turn, I thought it could be quite strong for me to get into those farm upgrades, and then be better prepared for both of those impacts ideally. ERock goes for the cannons this turn, plays the patriotism, reveals the Napoleonic army tactic, builds a cannon, goes for another computers upgrade, takes the revolutionary idea, and the urban growth is now the strongest. I'm now the weakest, so I was a bit afraid of getting hit by some strength events. Sektat seeds and the freedom of movement is revealed. That's no strength event, so I was happy to see it. Sektat will use it to put that second lab into journalism. Will also be able to get into democracy. Sadly, he's now on 8 actions at 14 culture production. So I think that democracy gives him quite a big boost. But I mean, in the last game that we saw on this channel, I was playing in first position, he in second, and I was the one who got an early democracy, even earlier than he gets it now. So it's probably just fair that he is the one who is getting that early democracy. But going up to 14 culture production will certainly make it a bit harder for me to keep up with him. He then increases his population a bunch of times and is out of corruption, has still lots of resources saved up. He didn't take the professional sports, I mean he can't take it anyway, but ERock doesn't take it. It's not discarded before my turn, and the mechanized agriculture is available as well. I start my turn by seeding, because I might at the end have a bunch of fine impacts. I have 2 already in hand, so I wanted to just use every politics action from now on, so I seed the impact of agriculture. For the impact of balance, it might be worthwhile to have more time to prepare for. There's again no strength event revealed, which I was happy about, but still not an ideal event, because the armaments industry is sadly only giving resources to my opponents. And I will start this turn by taking a bunch of cards, which I think are all too important for me to have. I will not take the air forces here, which is somewhat dangerous, because ERock, with having the Napoleonic army tactic, could go for some pressure. But with me having at least a chance to get into the modern army tactic, I felt safe enough with my many resources. And I also, if I played too safe, I don't have any chance to catch up to Sektat, so I made a decision to pass in the air forces here. Instead, I will go for the tanks to have just some strong units available that I can invest into and to be able to go into the modern army tactic at some point. Then I get the professional sports. It's still possible that I win the historic territory. Maybe I don't need the happy faces as urgently, but if I don't win that colony, I really need those happy faces, and even if I win the colony, it could still be a nice card to have for impacts and Nobel prizes, so I take that one in hand. Also, before I forget it, I used the freedom of movement to put a coal into opera. Maybe the drop in resource production could still be relevant, but I probably still have more than enough, and just getting that population into opera where it will produce me 3 culture production and give me a happy face, I think is worthwhile for me, even though it actually I basically waste 2 resources because the coal costs 8, opera only is 6, but still I think the population is just more useful in the opera. I thought about moving a swordsman into the opera, but I came to the conclusion that I kind of want to build a tank here, and I also thought having a full legion could still be strong to make it more likely that I'm able to win the historic territory, so at the end I decided against moving a swordsman into opera instead. I thought I might not need the 3rd mine any longer. And then another technology that I want to take is that copy of mechanized agriculture, with the impact of agriculture coming and with having the impact of balance in hand. I took the left copy of mechanized agriculture, which makes the right copy still available for ERock, but it makes it that the air forces stay on 3 civil actions for him, which I think is in this situation the more relevant factor. I developed the tanks. I can build one. I could get out of corruption by just increasing my population one more time, but instead I made the decision to develop the mechanized agriculture and go for a farm upgrade already. That will mean that I have corruption, but with having that strong resource production, that's maybe not too relevant. Maybe the additional food that I get earlier is more relevant, especially because the impact of agriculture might even be revealed relatively soon if my opponents cede. And there is a red cross, so not increasing my population and upgrading my farm, my food income could also help me going for the red cross. It's still a bit dangerous because ERock could soon be somewhat threatening, but I was hoping that I'm safe for the next turn. I can go for 2 outdated modern army tactics or just copy the Napoleonic army tactic. And in 2 turns I, again, with the many resources, hopefully will find a way to be safe. I draw some cards, more impacts, that is good. Impact of government could be strong if I get an H3 government form. Impact of technology is at the moment actually the strongest for me. I already went into engineering, civil service, mechanized agriculture and tanks, already 4 technologies at this still relatively early point in H3. ERock seeds, sadly there's a terrorism revealed, so I will lose one of my opera. Sektat loses the 1 computer that he had. Then ERock will go for Einstein. I mean, he needs a new leader, has a lot of science production, so that makes sense. He takes the air forces, develops them, scoring 3 culture with Einstein. And with increasing his population and building an air force, he gets out of corruption, and he is now somewhat threatening, is already sitting at 32 strength, and he could, when he declares a war the next turn, play the patriotism, build a cavalryman, build an air force, and go towards an amount of strength where I and Sektat have to at least play around. Sektat cedes, meaning now my historic territory is revealed. I was willing to send my whole legion tactic and all of my cards, but I had of course to think about whether I am then potentially in danger of a war from ERock. And there is the chance that things could get dangerous for me, but only if Sektat takes the modern infantry away. But there are a lot of interesting cards that he could take. He has the rifleman already. It could look for him like I maybe want to make a transition into mechanized army tactic with sending all of those infantry units away. And with that I was really hoping that I get the modern infantry, and if I get the modern infantry I'm not in danger of a war even after sending all of those units away. And if I don't get the modern infantry, I can maybe still play a turn where I just build some cannons and maybe another tank and then be able to go for modern infantry maybe at the next turn. It gets a bit more awkward, but ERock might also be threatened by my potential of going into the mechanized army tactic, so even then I was hoping maybe I could get out of it, but if the modern infantry is denied it could get a bit annoying, but I was hoping that it is rather unlikely. So I was happy that I won this colony, meaning I don't fall too much behind in culture. I am still behind in culture, but again, with the Bill Gates bonus, it's not that much. So the 11 culture of the colony helps me to stay in touch with Sektat here. Sektat, of course, also has to be careful about the strength push that ERock has done. He builds a professional sports, builds a rifleman, takes some yellow cards that help him to build more military, increases his population, builds another rifleman. He has no cannons or rockets for now, no air forces, so I was hoping that maybe there's a chance that he gets hit by a war, which of course would be a great way for me to overtake him. So that was the hope that I'm having, especially now that I saw that he didn't deny the modern infantry, which I think is probably the correct choice for him. At my turn, I see the impact of balance, which could be a mistake. I just felt like it is the impact that I want to see the most, because it has the chance to give me the most points against my opponents. But it is also an impact asset where I maybe need some more time, and even at my last turn, maybe only at that time I will be able to improve it by a lot. And I will now go for a turn where I, at the next turn, will be able to develop democracy. If I will then be able to do it at the next turn, it depends on how the game continues. Maybe I need to be a bit more careful, maybe invest into the cannons and it gets delayed, and then maybe I can also only improve the impact of government at my last turn, but there's maybe a decent chance that I will have a good impact of government from the next turn on. So maybe I should have seeded impact of government first, but there is still an H2 event here, and I thought probably I have some time still to prepare for that impact of balance, but yeah, there's just a chance that maybe I will be running out of time at the end. The impact of wonders is revealed. It is one impact that wasn't seeded by me, so I was happy to seed it because it gives me the most points, so good news for me. I this turn go for modern infantry, and I will actually just build 3 of them, sadly missing out on 1 draw, but getting out of corruption and making it that I'm not the weakest, just in case there is for some reason impact of strength already in there, which is maybe not too likely, but could be possible. I'm also not in danger of an aggression. With having now sent a lot of defense cards away, ERock might try an aggression if I don't make sure to increase my strength by a significant amount. With the impact of agriculture coming, it would be kinda nice to go for another farm upgrade, but also it would actually give me enough food to potentially just take and finish the Red Cross, but in order to have enough civil actions for that, it would need to be in the 2 civil action area, maybe not too likely, and also ERock might continue being threatening with his army, and if I don't develop the cannons this turn, which I won't do, and then spend all of my actions at the next turn, I don't have rockets, and then I might be in danger, so I think the chance that I get a full Red Cross at the next turn is very low anyway, but nonetheless, there's the impact of agriculture. Generally, having more food could be nice. But despite me having that strong resource production, I still have to be careful here, because I am now at 24 resource production, at 24 resources at the next turn, which is just enough to build a modern infantry, a tank, and 2 cannons. And then I can reveal the tactic. I have just enough military actions to do that, which makes me more than safe, but I also kinda need to build that much to be really safe, so and to go for the second army. So if I go for that upgrade, I might have to take the reserves, but it felt somewhat inefficient, and there is the democracy plus the revolutionary idea available, which could allow me to go for the democracy at the next turn. Because I have theocracy, the democracy will give me 3 more actions, meaning if I play the revolutionary idea and then develop the democracy, I'm still at +1 actions compared to what I started with at my turn. Meaning I could even get an additional action, which could help me to actually get the Red Cross going, even when it is in the 3 civil action area. Because then after taking it and building 4 steps, I still have a civil action left over, which I could maybe use to, for example, if there's a copy available, take rockets so that I then still can threaten to go into the modern army. So yeah, and generally that gives me more culture, helps me for the impact of government, so that felt at the end just better instead of just trying to go for a farm upgrade and taking reserves. That just felt way too inefficient, and at the end it just felt like the cleanest turn to me here. Sadly I miss out on a draw, but I still do get an impacted displayable, so far I have been drawing some decent impacts. ERock doesn't go for the war. Sektat, I think, is somewhat safe here because there are 2 copies of rockets coming down the row, and without them, I think he could be in danger somewhat, but like this, he can just go for Napoleonic armies. ERock offers the military alliance to me, which I of course accept. He then takes the military theory, builds a cavalryman, plays the reserves, takes the reserves, and is at the next turn nicely prepared to just take and finish the Red Cross. But could maybe also go for a war if either I or Sektat are not careful here. Culture-wise at this point he is a bit behind, so he needs to either get a good Red Cross or maybe a war in order to have chances here. Sektat cedes, the impact of agriculture is revealed, while sadly I wasn't able to go for the second upgrade. At least I at this point still have the +1 food from my international trade agreement pact, so I at least get +13, so 3 more than my opponents. Sektat goes for the rockets, builds 1, copies the tactic, is now at 36 strength, so I'm the weakest again. He takes the tanks, the reserves, develops the tanks, so he's actually threatening to get into modern army here, and with that he is probably relatively safe. Now it's my second to last turn. I will this turn cede the impact of government in, as I will now go for the democracy. This time, sadly, the impact is quite good for Sektat. The impact of colonies gives him +6, so he has now an even bigger lead, but at least I get 3 points against ERock. And in this turn I will develop the democracy, and I have to pick up the rockets then, because otherwise I'm quite a bit in danger. And then I have some actions left, and here is maybe the main question of what wonder do I go for, because I could now, with my remaining actions, just take the Red Cross and build 4 steps. And if we think that ERock builds the last step, which is maybe likely, then it is a wonder that gives me 28 points against Sektat, so that is quite strong. But if that is all what I do, I am in danger of an aggression from ERock, and I think it's not unlikely that he will play one, with me having sent a bunch of defense cards away earlier. And that is a downside, and also I get less population generally, which I think will lead to worse impacts at my last turn. And because of that I didn't go for the Red Cross here. Instead I went for the United Nations. With that I have 2 actions left, and I have some food left, which allows me to build a tank, get out of corruption, and while it is not ideal because I miss out on a draw, I am willing to copy to the medieval army tactic here, because now I am 10 strength behind, meaning I'm just in the range of being able to defend against an aggression. So with that I'm safe. And then with my last action I could just increase my population, but I felt that my next turn probably have enough actions to do everything, even though it could get a bit close, so it could still maybe open up some more opportunities for me at the next turn. I thought about going for the movies, maybe building movies instead of operas could potentially be an idea, but with me having that impact of industry and the railroad, I felt like the best pick here could actually be taking that copy of oil, because for only 3 resources, if I develop the oil, I can upgrade a coal to oil, not needing a new population, and that already gives me +4 for this impact. And I have the United Nations, so I can seed an impact and evaluate one, so the impact of industry will very, very likely be used, because it will give me more points against Sektat than the impact of technology. And I will now give ERock the possibility to go for that Red Cross and just finish it completely, which will allow him to catch up in points, but I was still not too worried about him. And so I was fine with that being an option for him. And yeah, so that was my turn at the end, but if I don't draw new impact, then I could have seeded the impact of industry anyway, and if I then evaluate the impact of technology, that will likely be the same for me and for Sektat and give us a bunch of points against ERock. And with that, there is a good chance that the United Nations will only give me 16 points against Sektat instead of the 28 from the Red Cross. And while I maybe have some better impact preparation, also with the oil being available, maybe it's also a position where I need to take some risks in order to still finish first. Maybe I need to take the risk of getting hit by an aggression from ERock. But at the end, I went with the United Nations, and I think that helps me to maximize the impact of balance, which sadly there is now a chance that it could be revealed before my next turn, so I was afraid of that. Sadly, while I am with 40 strength safe from an aggression, I am still the weakest, and I felt like that one event which was seeded by ERock could certainly be a strength event, so I was afraid of that. The gap from me to Sektat is getting... there is a gap that I need to overcome, so I was not the most optimistic that I will have a good enough turn to overtake Sektat, but I thought it is possible with the United Nations, especially if I get lucky and draw a good impact, and I am just quite a bit safer than with the Red Cross. Maybe I should play towards the Red Cross and just hope to not get hit by an aggression, but I felt if ERock has one, it could just be very likely that he will play it, and then things could potentially be dangerous for me, so at the end I went with the United Nations play. I draw 2 cards. I actually draw an impact, but the impact of culture is rather nice to know that it is not in there. H4 starts. ERock seeds, and I was extremely happy to see that popularization of science. I was afraid of a bad event. Now it's actually an event that gives me plus 5 points against Sektat, who just lost Nobel at that point, so I was very happy to see that. ERock disbands the unit of swordsmen and then goes for an organized religion, finishes the Red Cross for a total of 34 points, so he is now quite a bit closer. But especially with me not having drawn a new good impact, now I will evaluate the impact of technology with the United Nations, and that will give me lots of points against ERock, and with that, I was not really that much afraid of him going for the full Red Cross here. And I think there's a chance that if he had the right tactic, maybe his own copy of Modern Army and with the Modern Infantry, I think there was the danger of him maybe having the tactic and going for war. I think I didn't consider this option as much as I should have. I mean, I was able to go for 2 Modern Army tactics myself, but I mainly checked only about his Napoleonic Army tactic, and there's a chance that I overlooked something here. But the Modern Infantry is only available for expensive for him, so maybe that card needed to be available for cheaper, and he also wrote something about that at the end. But let's first see how the games end. The game ends, Sektat offers this international tourism to ERock again. That was good news for me, because he doesn't have an impact. It only gives him +2 culture, and with him not seeding, it is more likely that I still have chances to improve my impact of balance and potential other impacts before they are revealed. So I was happy to see that. He builds a religion, and then builds an additional computer, goes for a bunch of upgrades from journalisms to multimedia, and him doing the turn, I felt it looks really like one of those 2 impacts that he has already put in there. One of them could be impact of science, because he's now at 14 science production, meaning even if I build a 4th lab, I can't overtake him. He will win the tiebreaker if the event is revealed. And he also has more than ERock, so if the event is revealed before ERock, if he should have seeded it, going up to 14 makes sure that he is the one who wins it. So it's a big hint. It's still not completely certain that he seeded it. Maybe he just wants to be prepared in case ERock or I have that impact, because then both of us could maybe overtake him if he doesn't make sure to go up to 14. So maybe it's just a preparation for that. I was hoping towards that, because it would not be good for me if he has such a strong impact in there. But yeah, I was fearing that likely that he does this turn, because the impact of science is actually in there. Also him building the religion I felt could be a hint towards the impact of variety, and he goes up to 20 culture production. For my turn, I think it's clear that I have to seed the impact of industry here and then evaluate the impact of technology with the United Nations. I could consider not seeding at all and then evaluating the impact of industry to get some points against Sektat, so that I don't reveal an impact that I might improve, because I will improve a lot of impacts during my turn. And I was especially afraid of revealing the impact of balance, but also other impacts, impact of happiness, impact of architecture, are quite a bit improved during my turn. So I could consider not seeding at all to just not reveal any impact, but I think if I want to have a chance of overtaking Sektat, which I was still having hope for, I need to take some risks, and I need to score the 3 additional culture for seeding, despite there being a risk of an impact being revealed that I could improve. I was hoping that impact of government will be revealed, but I was really afraid that there will be some impact revealed that I would just improve by quite a bit. Nonetheless, I think that's a risk that I need to take here, so I seeded the impact of industry into the deck. And sadly, unfortunately, the impact of balance is already revealed, so that is now revealed just a tiny bit too early. I still get +2 against my opponents, but with the turn that I had planned for my turn before that impact was revealed, I would have actually been able to improve that impact by +8. With building an additional HA farm, I would have had 11 or more in each of the productions, so I would have gotten +8 out of this impact. After that now being revealed already, I thought now it gets somewhat hard to catch up to Sektat, but maybe if I hit the right impacts, there's still some hope. I this turn increase my population, build an additional opera, build an additional religion. That I basically did in all the variations that I checked, especially because I felt that it's very likely that, or not very likely, but possible that impact of variety is in there. And then there were 2 main options that I considered after the impact of balance was revealed. Before that, I would have played a turn differently. But now I can go for the option that gives me the most save points, which would be to develop the oil and go for 1 and probably even 2 upgrades. Or I could do some other variations with my last civil actions, either build an additional religion instead of the 2nd upgrade, or build an additional mine, which also helps me for harmony. So I have some variations, but I go for the oil is the main point about that. And if I just were in a position where I just needed to score a good amount of points and to secure my placement, I maybe would have gone for developing the oil. But here I needed to think about scenarios that maybe could still allow me to overtake Sektat. And one of the scenarios, even though I considered it to be unlikely, especially because Sektat didn't put any emphasis in denying the satellites, but I felt like if maybe Sektat has seeded the impact of progress as one of those 2 impacts from him. And it's possible, his impact of progress is fine, but after I get the satellites, mine would be quite a bit higher, then maybe I could have a chance of getting quite some good points out of a strong impact, or out of an impact that he has actually seeded. And if then maybe ERock has also pushed a good impact, maybe impact of strength, that gives me at the end +7 against Sektat or something else, I felt like maybe then I could still have a chance of overtaking Sektat. And because of that, instead of going for the oil play, I went for the satellites, which not only helps me for the impact of progress, but also because of me doing some other stuff with the remaining actions, building that additional opera basically. I have also +2 for variety because of going for the satellites. I have +2 for happiness because of building that opera. I have +2 for the architecture. I'm not sure if I mentioned it already. And but again, 3 less save points. So without the impact of progress, likely that will just be worse, but at this point, the impact of progress being one of the impacts that Sektat maybe has seeded earlier was the thing that I had the most hopes into to maybe secure me the 1st place, so I went for that play. And after United Nations, I will reveal the impact of technology, which is very bad for ERock because both I and Sektat will get +14 points against him. So with that, ERock, the hopes that maybe he still had are now again very small. ERock seeds, opens the impact of government. That should have been revealed earlier, then I could have gone for a bigger impact of balance, but sadly it is not revealed. It's revealed now. At least the impact of government gives me some points against my opponents. ERock goes for the modern infantry, upgrades 1. I first was hoping that him going for upgrading 1 means that maybe he pushed the impact of strength and will overtake me in strength, but sadly he afterwards disbands the cavalryman in order to build a computer, which either means he himself has ceded impact of science, or he wants to overtake Sektat, who made it very much look like he has ceded impact of science. Maybe Sektat only improved his science because he wanted to be prepared if either I or ERock wanted to cede the impact of science. Maybe ERock, because of Sektat doing that, overtook him in science again to be prepared for, and hopefully the impact of science is just not in there at all, but that was only a small hope that I was having at that point. Before the final impacts, we can see that I'm actually not that far behind. With the Bill Gates bonus, I'm only 5 points behind Sektat. The thing is, despite me having Bill Gates and being in a position to build a lot of stuff, there are still a lot of impacts that are actually better for Sektat. And with now it being likely that impact of strength wasn't pushed, I was a bit skeptical, especially because impact of science looks so likely, but it is certainly still possible that with the right impacts I could overtake Sektat here. And ERock is quite a bit behind, so I think he at this point is out of the game. The first impact is the impact of industry that I've ceded, so I catch up some points against Sektat. Then there is indeed the impact of science, so one of my opponents pushed it in there, and at least it was, if Sektat pushed it, and it was one of his impacts, then at least it was revealed after ERock's turn, so that I only lose 7 instead of 14 points to Sektat. Then there's the impact of harmony. If I would have gone for the impact of balance preparation, I actually would have scored 20 in that, because I would have built the additional HA farm. It was still an option to consider for my turn that I went for now. So I considered some lines where I prepare for harmony, but at the end decided against it. But it is an impact in there, so I lose 4 points to my opponents. There's the impact of happiness, which I lose 4 points again towards my opponents. And then there's the impact of variety, which is quite strong for Sektat, also fine for me, but again I lose 4 points towards him, and that means that even after the Bill Gates bonus I am a somewhat significant amount of culture behind Sektat, and only I'm able to finish at the 2nd position here. And at the end I didn't manage to find the ways to overtake Sektat in culture here. With the last 2 impacts actually being happiness and variety, going for the satellites was actually still better than the oil play, because with those 2 impacts I gained +4 instead of the 3 safe culture that I would have gotten with the oil play, unless I would have gone for an oil play with a variation where I improved the impact of harmony. And so it was an interesting game. Sektat doing some strong Barbarossa stuff, putting some pressure on us early game. I went into the theocracy, something that you maybe are not having as a government form too often. But with the pyramids I think it can be quite fine. I got this early James Watt, I was able to build up a very strong production, but then at the end of age 2 Sektat found nice ways to improve his culture production, was running away with the culture bit, had some very strong production with the Suez Canal that he was able to build, and then he got the early democracy this time, but also was just nicely prepared for it. There are 2 copies, so that was not too unlikely, and he was then in a strong position, run away with the culture, managed to threaten enough strength to be safe from anything that ERock could do, and then I wasn't able to score enough points. Maybe I should have just gone for the Red Cross, maybe with some other impact orders I could have gotten closer, but at the end the gap was big enough so that I might have still only finished 2nd, even when I would have maybe tried something slightly different, or if the impact of balance would have been revealed a bit later. I needed to hope for maybe in Sektat not having impact of science, maybe ERock ceding impact of strength. I think I would have needed a very fortunate combination of impacts at the end in order to be able to still win this game. At least I finished 2nd, so I still score some points. And and also after the game ERock mentioned that at the 2nd to last round he had a hybrid war in hand, and if I understood it correctly, I think he maybe had even a modern army tech, or at least the modern infantry being available for 3 civil actions limited him in going for that war, with also having some uprising issues after having declared a hybrid war. So he couldn't pull that off, but I maybe didn't realize enough that there is still a copy of modern infantry left in the deck, and that maybe if he has a modern infantry, modern army tactic, maybe things could have gotten dangerous. I haven't calculated it yet, if I actually would have been in danger of a war here, but it could be. Luckily I didn't get hit by a war. Alright, and with that we are at the end of the game. We can now take a look at the standings, where actually now all of the games of the first batch have been finished, so it will be a very good point and will be very interesting to see how things are looking now after the first batch. Alright, first of all we can take a look at the other 2 games that have finished where I wasn't involved. Scipio was able to win another game after the win against me, against ERock and Sektat, and then 3-1 Let's Jam. After his 2 losses, very importantly, was able to win a game against Scipio and ERock. And with those results, we have now the following standings. Scipio has played a very strong first batch of games and will be my strongest contender for the first place, for the fight for promotion to the Grandmaster division. I have to catch up 3 points, so it won't be easy, but I will have 2 games against him in the second batch, so those games could potentially end up being very important. But here we 2 are of course not the only ones who have still chances to advance. Sektat is at 7 points, only 2 points behind me, and if my results should end up being very bad for me, then of course I could also still be in danger of relegation potentially. For 3-1 Let's Jam, I think the 1 win was now very important, making it that he is in touch with the places that aren't relegated at the end, while ERock didn't have the best first batch of games, but if he scores nicely in the next 3 games, he also of course can still stay in the league. Alright, so with that we have half of the season already covered. The games from the second batch are ongoing but not finished yet. I hope you're looking forward to those, and with that I say thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.